A lot of people struggle to stick to a calorie deficit because they're unable to control their hunger or keep their hunger under control. And there's a few ways that you can go about actually keeping your hunger in check, because there are times when you're in a calorie deficit, especially for a long period of time, it can be very hard to actually maintain, especially if you're someone who has 20, maybe 30 pounds of body fat to lose, right? You're not going to lose that in 4 to 6 weeks, right? You can't just do a little 4 to 8 week cut and you're going to be nice and lean, right? You need at least 6 to 12 months. So in order to maintain that, there's a few things you need to go about doing to make sure you can control your hunger to allow you to stay in a calorie deficit for a sustained period of time to actually get that lean and attractive physique that you want, right? And the first thing I'm going to go over is protein, right? And I know you've probably heard this a million times before, but you want to make sure you keep your protein high. So you want a pound of protein per pound of body weight. So if you're 170 pounds, you need to be getting 170 grams of protein in. 20 to 30% should come from fats, and then the rest of your calories you want to make up from carbs, right? And that's going to help you preserve the muscle, right? It's because when you're cutting, you don't want to lose weight, you want to lose fat, because there's a difference. You could, if you put yourself in a calorie deficit but you're just eating donuts and cakes and chocolate, right? Yeah, you'll lose weight in a calorie deficit, but a lot of that will probably be muscle tissue as well as fat, which is what you want to avoid. If you want a lean and aesthetic physique, you want to make sure you preserve as much muscle as possible. Otherwise, you'll probably look worse by the end of it, right? You won't get the desired outcome that you want if you're not eating enough protein. So you need to make sure you keep protein high, right? The second is time in your meals. This is one thing that helped me actually deal with hunger, right? If you're someone that you find that you'll end up binging maybe later in the day, if you're a late night snacker, because a lot of people are, right? They're sitting on the couch, they're a bit bored, watching some telly, and they end up snacking on things. Before they know it, they've consumed 500 to 1,000 calories, right? If you're that type of person, what you want to do is when you're in a calorie deficit, save the majority of your calories for towards the end of the day, right? If you're someone that generally eats more in the morning, then maybe have more of your calories in the morning and leave yourself a snack for the evening. But if you're someone that finds you end up binging at night, save the majority of your calories at night. It's going to help you stop you binging at nighttime. Because I found that myself, that's when I struggled the most, was in the evening time. It would get to the evening, I'll get bored, I'd be sitting around, and then I'm like, there's some crisps there, some chocolate there, and then before you know it, your calorie deficit's out the window, right? And that leads into my third point is out of sight, out of mind. If you're someone that doesn't have the willpower to avoid eating these bad foods, don't buy them at all. If you live with other people that buy these, tell them to put it somewhere that you don't know and won't be able to find it. Because when you're in a calorie deficit, right, you can't just rely on willpower alone, because there'll be days when you're down bad. And if you see that in the cupboard, there's a good chance you're going to eat it, right? So make sure you just don't go out of your way to buy these foods. Like I said, if you don't have the discipline and you don't have the willpower to avoid eating these foods, don't buy them. And then the temptation isn't there, it's completely gone, right? Because I know for me, if the food's there, I'm going to want to eat it, right? So, if, like I say, if you don't have the discipline, then don't buy them, right? It's a lot easier to stick to your deficit if you go in the fridge or you go in the cupboard and there's only healthy options in there, right? Because it's very hard to binge on, say, I don't know, almond nuts as compared to some Doritos, right? I could go for a whole big bag of Doritos, no problem at all, because I have a big appetite. But if I see some almond nuts in there, I'm not going to be able to eat a whole bag of almond nuts. I might end up having a few, but these foods are a lot harder to binge than, say, Doritos, chocolate, sweets, right? So, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. The other thing I want to go over is caffeine, right? Having some caffeine in the morning, which you might find you already do, can actually be a great way to suppress your appetite, because caffeine will actually suppress your appetite so you'll feel less hungry. And I do this a lot. I'll have my coffee in the morning, and once I've had my coffee, I normally then don't get hungry until about 12, maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So coffee can be a great way to suppress your appetite, and that can actually allow you to eat later in the day, which can help you stay within your calories. Because if you start eating too early in the day, so say for example, you eat at 7, 8 in the morning, as soon as you get up, right, you're hungry again by 11, 12 o'clock, right? And now you've got to try and fit all these calories in over a longer period of time. When if you shorten that window of eating, you'll find you'll feel fuller, and you'll be able to stick to it for longer, right? Which is essentially intermittent fasting. If you intermittent fast, say from 12 till 8, you'll find it easier to stick to your calorie deficit than as opposed to eating at 6, 7 in the morning, right? That's what I do. I'll wake up, I'll have my black coffee because it doesn't break my fast. And then I won't eat until about 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I'll have another smaller meal around maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. And then I'll have one last big meal towards the end of the day, which will fill me up, help me sleep, help me recover, right? So that goes back to my point before about timing your meals. Right? If you can time your meals to actually in and around what suits you, because you might have a different lifestyle to me, right? If you're a night shift worker, it could be completely different. So this is why I say time your meals to round what suits you, and it will help you massively to stick to your deficit, right? Like I said, I would probably avoid, if you're someone who eats first thing in the morning, I would avoid that, right? Find things that will help you fill you up. Even doesn't even have to be coffee. If you're not a coffee drinker, find something that's 0 calorie, like a soft drink, right? Like a soft drink like Coke Zero or Diet Coke, that's essentially near to 0 calories. Those things help fill you up. And I know some people say, oh, you shouldn't drink them on a calorie deficit. They're not good for you. One's going to be fine. All right. I'm not telling you to drink it all day. Obviously, the majority of your liquids should come from water. But if you're having one, it will actually help fill you up, right? And it will stop you from snacking and things like that, right? And that leads me into another point is stop consuming liquid calories because they're not going to fill you up at all, right? Liquid calories, they go down very easily and they're not going to fill you up. And when I'm talking about liquid calories, I'm not talking about a whey protein shake, for example. That's fine. When I'm talking about liquid calories, I'm talking about juice or milkshakes, right? Or lattes, frappuccinos. They have a lot more calories than you'd think, right? So if you can avoid them, I would, and replace them with whole foods. Because again, if you could have like a drink of orange juice, right? You could have a whole carton of orange juice, and then you could go to Costa and get a frappuccino. That's probably like 500 calories right there, right? So if you're on a calorie deficit and you can only eat 2,200, that's a big portion of your calories taken up, right? So this is why I say avoid liquid calories if you can, and stick to whole foods with volume, right? They're actually going to fill you up they're going to be high satiety, they're going to fill you up. If you was to take 500 grams of sweet potato, for example, that's probably about 400 calories. If you was to take 500 grams of dairy milk chocolate, right, it's going to be very calorie dense. It's not going to be that much in terms of volume, and it's not going to fill you up. Whereas the 500 grams of sweet potato, lower in calories, higher in volume, is going to fill you up. So again, it's going to help you stick to your deficit because you're going to feel fuller for longer. These foods are going to fill you up compared to eating a load of crap that's just high in calories, low volume, not going to benefit your cut, is not going to help you get the aesthetic physique that you want, because you're just not going to be able to stick to it for long enough, right? So this is why I say it's important to eat whole foods. You want foods that are going to fill you up, make you feel full. They're going to preserve muscle. They're going to give you energy in the gym. If you're eating a bunch of crap, chocolate, sweets, whatever, you're going to feel like shit. Your training is going to be terrible. Your recovery is going to be terrible. You're going to get a shit end result anyway, because you probably won't stick to it. Let's be real. You're not going to stick to a deficit if you're just eating crap, because it would be so hard to sustain for a long period of time, and you're just going to feel like crap. It's not worth doing, right? Eat the right foods. Find foods you enjoy, because I've said it in my past videos. The foods you enjoy, right? The diet you stick to is the one you enjoy, right? If you, like I said, I've said before in previous videos, if you don't like eggs, don't eat them. There's plenty of other different whole foods you can eat. There's steak, there's chicken, there's turkey, right? But find whole foods. And that's another thing as well, is try to include fiber into your meals too, because protein is important. It's going to make you feel full. Fiber is as well. So if you're having chicken and sweet potato, right? Have chicken, sweet potato, and some broccoli on the side, because broccoli, again, is high in fiber and very low in calories. It's going to make you feel more full. Fiber will make you feel full, so will protein, right? And combined together, they're going to be very high satiety. It's going to help you feel full for longer. You're going to be able to sustain a calorie deficit for long enough to be able to achieve the results that you want, right? But don't get me wrong, at the same time, hunger is part of the process. When it comes to getting lean, when it comes to getting in shape, I don't think anybody who's gotten lean hasn't got hungry, right? I get hungry every morning before my first meal, right? But that doesn't mean I just go out and start binging because I'm hungry. No, no. I know the fact that getting lean, it takes sacrifice, right? So you have to go through that, right? There's no way around it, right? If you want to get in lean and you want to get in shape, you're going to have some hunger pains, because at the end of the day, a calorie deficit is essentially you're a controlled, you're starving yourself, but it's controlled, right? So there's no way around feeling hungry. There's going to be times you're going to feel hungry. That's just part of the process, right? Like I said, you're starving yourself, but it's a controlled starvation. So hunger is going to be a part of the process. You just got to accept that, right? But like I said, you're doing the right things, like things I've mentioned, that can mitigate some of the hunger. So you're not always like sitting there with a rumbling stomach, because no one's going to be able to maintain that. If you're sitting down all the time and your stomach's rumbling, stomach's going crazy because you're just eating a bunch of crap food, and not having that high satiety food, you're not having like your sweet potatoes and your mince and your broccoli and things that are going to fill you up, you're not going to be able to maintain it, and you're going to quit, right? And that is why a lot of people end up quitting, because they're not doing the right things, right? Another thing is drinking before you eat, right? Have like a glass of water before you eat your meal and after you've eaten your meal. Again, it will fill your stomach up with volume. It will help you feel fuller for longer. And that's how you get through your day is by making sure your stomach is filled up with a lot of volume. High volume foods, low calories, going to make you feel fuller for longer. You're going to find it a lot easier to get through the day, right? And then you just repeat that each day. You repeat it. Yes, you're going to get hungry, but if you actually eat the right foods, you drink plenty of water, you fill your stomach up with enough volume, you're going to be able to maintain it because you're not going to be sitting there absolutely starving. Yes, you may feel hungry at times. That's part of the process, but you're not going to be sitting there absolutely starving, and you're not depriving your muscles of what they need to actually retain the muscle and potentially even build it. If you're new to weightlifting, you might even find you body recomp and you actually build a better muscle whilst losing weight. Yeah, so I'm going to leave those few pointers with you. Make sure you stay locked in.